Well, one of the most interesting things to come out of the November 1812 bombardment between Fort Niagara and Fort George is a character named Betsy Doyle. And what Betsy seems to have been doing is running the red-hot cannonballs, running the hot shot from the shot furnace, which had been erected on the roof of the castle, to the cannons back and forth, and evidently kept this up throughout the entire bombardment.
In his report after the battle, Lieutenant Colonel McFeely mentioned that she showed a fortitude equal to the Maid of Orleans, who, of course, was Joan of Arc.
Finally, in the spring of 1813, Fort Niagara's cannons and the guns of an American naval squadron all but destroy Fort George.
While the campaign starts out very optimistically for the American Army with the capture of Fort George in May of 1813, things tend to turn sour after that.
By December 10th, the regular American forces have pulled out, and Fort George is left in the hands of restless militiamen, ready to do the same.
The Americans decided to abandon the Canadian side, retreat back to the eastern shore, and in doing so burned not only the remnants of Fort George, but the entire town of Newark.
In retaliation, 562 British soldiers launch a daring nighttime assault on Fort Niagara. Using their bayonets, the British force their way inside. On this night, the American garrison is completely caught off guard.
Fort Niagara had a plan for defense against a British assault, and there were positions assigned to the various troops within the fort. But for some reason on that night, vigilance had been relaxed to the point of probably being criminal.
3 columns of British soldiers methodically attack each of the American strongholds. Small groups of defenders put up stiff resistance. But in less than 30 minutes, it was all over. 340 American soldiers became prisoners of war. 65 lay dead.
The British had achieved a major military victory and a trove of equipment, and large numbers of cannon, muskets, gunpowder, all sorts of military stores. They captured the big American flag that flew over the garrison. They took the flag as a trophy of war.
On the morning of December 19th, 1813, the Union Jack was flying at Fort Niagara once again. The Treaty of Ghent ends the War of 1812, and Fort Niagara is returned to the Americans. The fort has seen its last shots fired in anger.
The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 and the Welland Canal shortly thereafter, in one single blow, eliminate 150 years of geographic and military significance for Fort Niagara.
Minor border crises would spur further changes to the fort. But these improvements would soon be obsolete.
Following the Civil War, you get a real change in focus of the garrisons here. No longer is the walled fortification going to be an effective deterrent to modern artillery that can tear masonry fortifications apart. And so what you get instead is more of an emphasis on training. Fort Niagara reinvents itself.
Outside the fort's walls, American troops train for remote wars in Cuba, the Philippines, and Europe. But after World War I, the old fort is abandoned. Nearly 3 centuries of history is in danger of disappearing.
There were serious problems. The French castle was starting to collapse. There was always the relentless pounding of Lake Ontario against the point and the seawall that protected the fort.
Beginning in the mid-1920s, a number of people start to take a very keen interest in seeing that these buildings don't disappear.
Today, on behalf of New York State, the Old Fort Niagara Association is charged with preserving the site's past and its future. One of its most prized artifacts is the Garrison Flag, captured by the British in the War of 1812.
It was probably the flag that flew over Fort Niagara during the time that Betsy Doyle manned her cannon, and that Fort Niagara, troops from Fort Niagara captured Fort George, and right through the War of 1812.
Well, the Fort Niagara Garrison Flag is currently considered to be one of the most significant flags in America. Fort Niagara's flag bears a striking resemblance to the Star-Spangled Banner.
This grand but delicate artifact reclaims its rightful place back home at Fort Niagara. It began as an outpost and grew into a fortress. Through the eras, it's withstood the ravages of war and nature. On these grounds is written the struggle for a continent.
And you walk across the parade ground of Fort Niagara, and you know that on the night of December 19, 1813, there were soldiers running across there with bayonets being fired on, firing at people, dying. Cannonballs flew over the walls in 1759, and you're in a place where real things happened, and I think that provides a real connection with the past.
This program was produced by WNED, which is solely responsible for its content.